My boyfriend's mother tried to replace my late mom. I finally snapped. I always thought I knew what it meant to lose someone important until I lost my mom. She was my center, my support, and even now, almost 2 years after her death, her voice, her laughter, and her quirky habits still echo vividly in my head. My childhood was ordinary but cozy. Mom cooked dinners where we'd sit as a family, discussing the silliest details of the day, and her advice, even when it was sharp, always helped me make the right decisions. When I met Dan, my boyfriend, I was cautious because losing Mom had left a void in my soul, and I was afraid to let anyone get too deep into it. But Dan was different. He was patient, attentive, and most importantly, he understood that Mom was more than just a person to me. She was part of my heart. His support was what helped me move forward without losing myself in memories and grief. We'd been dating for almost a year when I first met his mother, Laura. The meeting was standard. A light dinner, smiles, talks about work and hobbies. But from the first minutes, I felt something strange. Laura was too attentive, too caring. Her gaze lingered on me too long when she talked about my habits and how I looked. And that smile, which seemed friendly at first glance, gradually started to take on a shade of control. At first, it was little things. She gave me souvenirs from the heart, said I should do this for myself, like Mom would. Commented on details from my childhood that I'd never told anyone else, and I felt awkward but tried to chalk it up to normal concern from my boyfriend's mom. But gradually, her interference became more obvious. On the surface, it looked like friendly care. She brought me food when I was sick, called to check how I slept, offered advice on cleaning and planning my day. But behind it was something more, something that made me feel like she wanted to take my mom's place, not just in my life, but in my memory. One evening, when Dan had gone out on business, Laura showed up unannounced. I remember opening the door and seeing her with some homemade baking. She was smiling, but there was something odd in her smile. "Hi, dear, I thought you'd be tired after work," she said, walking in as if it were her home. Thanks, Laura, but I was just about to." I started, but she interrupted me. "Oh, don't worry, I've got everything ready, and I wanted to chat a bit. You loved it when your mom did this for you, right?" Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, but every word sounded like a reproach. I felt something snap inside me. I knew I couldn't tell her straight out that it was inappropriate because Dan was around. He always defended his mom, and I didn't want to start a conflict out of nowhere. But then I realized this was just the beginning. Over the next weeks, her interference intensified. She started hinting at how my mom would do it differently, comparing my habits and decisions to how my late mom would have acted. Sometimes she'd come in without knocking, leave her things in our apartment, as if checking if I felt at home, the way she thought was right. At first, I tried to be patient. I told myself, maybe she's just caring. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just care. It was an attempt to seize the space that was sacred to me, to rewrite my story and replace the person I loved who would never come back. Dan noticed something was off but didn't fully grasp the scale. He'd say, "Mom just wants to be part of your life, don't take it to heart." I'd nod, but inside, anxiety was growing. Every interference left a void, as if she was trying to erase traces of my mom and fill them with her version of care. The first signs that I couldn't take it anymore appeared when Laura started planning holidays without my input, pretending she knew how my mom would want it. She'd arrange photos that were dear to me, touch my personal things, give advice on every decision, from how I dressed to how I talked to colleagues. I tried talking to Dan about how it was starting to oppress me, that I felt uncomfortable, but as usual, he defended her, calling me too sensitive. Those words cut deep into my soul, not just because he didn't understand, but because I felt completely alone. The person I loved was on the side of the woman trying to erase the memory of my mom. Gradually, I started noticing how this situation was affecting my health. I slept poorly, often waking up in the middle of the night feeling like someone was watching my every move. I caught myself more and more checking if she'd left her traces in my home, if she'd touched my things, if she'd changed something that mattered to me. I realized the situation was getting out of control. This wasn't ordinary mother-in-law care anymore. It was an attempt to substitute, control, invade my life, and rewrite it in her image. And that's when I seriously thought for the first time, could I endure this without destroying myself? Could I keep my relationship with Dan if he didn't understand that his mom was going too far? That thought became my first real step toward a decision. I had to set boundaries, or I'd lose myself. And I knew it would be hard, scary, and possibly lead to the confrontation I'd been trying to avoid. With each week, I felt my life shrinking into a tight, stuffy cocoon under Laura's supervision. She stopped holding back. If her visits seemed random before, now they were scheduled almost daily. She'd come unannounced, take keys to the apartment in case you're busy, bring groceries to make it easier for you, and start criticizing my lifestyle as if I were a child, not an adult woman who'd lost her mother. One evening, when Dan was late at work, Laura came again. This time, she brought old photos, my childhood pictures with Mom, and started showing me how, in her opinion, I should preserve the memory, as if Mom's role was now hers. "Look, dear," she said, leaning over the table. "Mom always did it this way. You should do it right." I froze. The words right and should felt like a knife to the heart. This wasn't care. This was power. An attempt to control every step and impose her understanding of how I should live. "Laura, these are my memories," I said, trying to stay calm. "I'll figure out how to keep them myself." She smiled as if it were a joke. "Of course, dear, I just wanted to help." But her help became more overt. She started pressuring Dan, saying I was too sad, that I constantly missed Mom, and that he needed to take better care of me so I don't feel lonely. Dan didn't realize that behind his back, a new reality was being created where I was supposed to stop being myself. One morning, I woke up and saw she'd left a note on my desk with advice on how to keep the house in perfect order, like Mom. I got angry. I got up, called Dan, and said I wanted to talk about Laura. "Dan," I started, "she's crossing boundaries. I feel like I'm losing myself." He sighed, irritably adjusting his shirt. "You're taking everything too personally. Mom's just caring." "No, Dan, this isn't care anymore. She's trying to replace my mom. She wants to be the center of my life. I can't tolerate this." He was silent, and in that moment, I realized we were looking at the same problem from different sides. For me, it was psychological control. For him, it was a mother's love. Events unfolded quickly after that. Laura started coming on weekends that used to be ours, organizing meetings with Mom's friends, inviting people I didn't know, and telling them details of my life as if trying to convince everyone that she now knew me better than I knew myself. My attempts to talk to her directly ended badly. She'd always smile and say, "I just want to help, dear. You're too emotional." I felt my anger building, but I also understood that open confrontation with Laura could destroy my relationship with Dan. But my inner protest was stronger. I couldn't let someone erase the memory of my mom and impose their worldview on me. One day, I came home and found that Laura had rearranged the photos in the apartment. She'd put her souvenirs on my shelves, moved my books, and even changed the order in the kitchen. My reaction was instant. I grabbed the phone and called Dan. "Dan, she came again and changed everything," I said, barely holding back tears. He tried to calm me. "Darling, don't dramatize. She's just trying to help." "No, Dan, this isn't help. She wants to become my mom." I felt my heart pounding in my chest. "I can't live like this." And that's when the first real fight broke out in our apartment. Words flew like knives. "She's violating my boundaries. You're too sensitive. She's trying to replace me. I just want you to be happy." After that conversation, I realized I couldn't endure it anymore. I started planning how to defend my boundaries. I looked for ways to show Laura that her behavior was unacceptable without destroying my relationship with Dan. It was almost impossible because he still thought his mom was acting with the best intentions. I started recording all her interferences, saving photos, documents, noting every invasion into my personal life. My inner tension grew, and I knew I'd soon have to take decisive action. Meanwhile, I watched as Laura invaded our relationship deeper. She discussed our plans with Dan, suggested changing habits I considered part of my identity, interfered in our conversations about the future, sometimes even trying to manipulate Dan through guilt. If your mom were here, she'd want me to take care of her. I felt cornered but knew. If I gave in, I'd lose not only the memory of mom but myself. The decision didn't come right away, but it was clear. It was time to act. This time, I decided to act decisively. I realized that no talks with Laura would help. Her care was no longer care. It was an attempt to control my life, impose her presence everywhere possible, and essentially erase the memory of my mom. I started with a conversation with Dan. This time, I prepared. I showed him records of all her interferences, photos, examples of how she controlled me, and her messages leading to manipulations. Dan, I said quietly but firmly, this isn't care anymore. It's invasion. She's trying to replace my mom and control every step. If we don't set boundaries, I'll lose myself. He looked at me first in surprise, then started listening attentively. I told him how every action of hers caused me pain, how she turned our relationship into a tribunal where I was always guilty. You know she's a mother, he muttered, but I didn't think it was this serious. She's not just a mother anymore, Dan. Tears broke through my anger and pain. She's trying to take my mom's place. I can't live under her control. After that conversation, Dan finally saw the scale of the problem. He agreed that boundaries were needed. We discussed specific steps together: limit Laura's visits, ban interference in our home and personal affairs, clearly state that her advice and attempts to control our relationship were unacceptable. The next few days were a real test. Laura still came, but now we were ready for her maneuvers. When she tried to rearrange photos and souvenirs again, Dan gently but firmly said, "Mom, these are our rules. We appreciate you, but this is our home and our life." She frowned, as if not understanding why everything had changed. I felt relief. For the first time in a long while, I was back in control of my life. But the inner tension wasn't just from Laura. I was fighting guilt and fear that I might ruin my relationship with Dan. I thought a lot about how to preserve my love for him while protecting myself. My decision was tough. We decided to temporarily limit contact with Laura, make her understand that interfering in our personal affairs was unacceptable, but still maintain respect and love for her as Dan's mother. One day, Laura tried to organize a meeting with our mutual friends to tell them how I should live. I felt anger boiling inside, but decided to act differently. I calmly explained the situation to the friends, showed specific examples of her behavior, and to my relief, they supported me. That gave me confidence. With each such situation, I learned to defend my boundaries. I realized that respect for myself and my memory of Mom was more important than fear of conflicts. I was no longer afraid to say no. And surprisingly, Dan started seeing me in a new light, as a strong and determined woman capable of standing up for her rights. The climax came a few weeks later. Laura arrived with a new plan. She wanted to revise all our family traditions, suggesting improvements to match her vision of the ideal home. Dan and I sat at the table and made a decision. "Laura," I said calmly but firmly, "we appreciate you and your care, but we can't allow interference in our home and personal affairs anymore. If you want to be part of our life, you'll have to respect our rules." She froze. In her eyes flashed a mix of hurt and surprise, but now we were united. Dan held my hand, and I felt that finally we were together, controlling our relationship instead of letting outsiders destroy it. After that, Laura came less often. Her visits became formal, without attempts to control us or impose her opinion. I felt relief and inner freedom. I started building my life on my own terms again, preserving the memory of Mom while developing new relationships with Dan. In this period, I learned the main lesson: care and love aren't control. True closeness is only possible when each person maintains their personal boundaries and respects others. The story ended with me finally restoring my inner peace. Dan and I strengthened our relationship, Laura gradually accepted the new rules, and I felt like myself again. A woman, my mother's daughter, and a partner, not an object of someone else's control.